When have you seen someone get tangled in a web of their own lies? I have very extreme vitiligo, always have since I was 15. By 20, I was 80% depigmented, and in college, every woman I dated made comments about it. Oh, what happened to your skin? Is it contagious? After getting rejected by a girl who said she couldn't deal with the stares, I started the treatment. Monobenzone cream to depigment the darker areas, making everything one uniform lighter tone. Complete depigmentation therapy. When I met Alicia 3 years ago at her cousin's barbecue, she grabbed my hand and commented on how my skin was like butter, so smooth and perfect. I've been driving to a dermatologist 2 hours away every month since then, telling Alicia I'm visiting my cousin Jerome, who has cancer. I even created fake text conversations with Jerome to show her. I use a special foundation on any remaining patches, take supplements to maintain even tone, avoid hot situations that might make me sweat it off, and sleep on silk pillowcases so nothing rubs away. The whole routine cost me $600 every visit, plus $200 monthly in products. Now, my and Alicia's daughter Jessica is 3 weeks old with the lightest brown skin I've ever seen. Alicia keeps taking photos, posting them online with captions like, "My beautiful mixed baby." She even bought special products for mixed hair and keeps telling her friends Jessica could model in the future. But of course, I'm genetically black, my whole family is. Alicia is too. This baby should be dark-skinned, not mixed. It all came to a head when Alicia started investigating me to see if I had white ancestry to explain Jessica's appearance. First, she asked for family photos. When I lied, we didn't have any, and my family didn't believe in photos. She gave me this weird look. She started with Google. I watched her one night typing my name plus my hometown, my birth year, anything she could think of. Nothing came up. Next came the yearbook hunt. She found my high school through an old tax document and called them pretending to be organizing a reunion. They emailed her my senior yearbook photo within a day. When she opened it at dinner, her fork clattered on her plate. A dark-skinned teenager stared back at us. "This must be wrong," I said quickly. "Common name, probably another, insert my name." But she'd already noticed the same scar above the eyebrow, the same crooked front tooth I'd had fixed. She got methodical after that, ordered my birth certificate through public records, parents' names. She searched them everywhere, found my mother's nursing license renewal from 2 years ago with her photo attached. Dark-skinned woman. Found my father through his electrician's union website, his photo from a retirement party, even darker than my mother. "Maybe you're adopted," she said desperately one morning, holding the printouts. That would explain everything. She called the hospital where I was born, pretended to be verifying insurance information. They confirmed that Cheryl Johnson, my mother's name, gave birth to a son on my exact birthday. She hung up and just stared at me. "Your parents are black. Fully black. Both of them." The medical investigation started next. She went through our insurance statements with a magnifying glass, found charges from a dermatologist 2 hours away, regular visits every month for 3 years. She called them. "Hi, I'm calling to confirm my husband's appointment." They put her on hold, came back. "His depigmentation therapy is scheduled for the 15th, same as always." She hung up and Googled depigmentation therapy for 3 straight hours. Michael Jackson articles, vitiligo treatments, before and after photos that looked exactly like my transformation. She printed everything, made a folder. I found it hidden in her drawer labeled evidence. Then she ordered a 23andMe kit for Jessica and herself, but didn't tell me. When Jessica's results came back showing 50% European ancestry, while Alicia's showed 100% African, she did the math out loud at dinner. "If I'm fully black and Jessica is half white, that means her father is white." She stopped, looked at me. "But you look white. You are white, aren't you?" She started testing my body, checking my skin in different lights, looking for patches. Found the spot behind my ear where the pigment was returning and took photos of it daily, watching it grow darker. She called my work, spoke to my longtime colleague James, the one who knew me before, asked about old company photos. James, thinking he was helping, emailed her our team photo from pre-treatment. She printed it out, circled my face with a red marker, the same face as the yearbook, just older. She confronted me with everything spread across the kitchen table. The yearbook, the insurance records, the dermatologist confirmation, my parents' photos, the DNA results, the monobenzone, the old work photo. Jessica's genetics made no sense. "You're black," she said, her voice shaking. "Fully black, using medical treatment to appear white. I've been looking for white ancestors that don't exist because you don't have any, which means Jessica can't be yours. The math doesn't work unless..." She trailed off, realizing what she'd just admitted. Connor, her white personal trainer who came back to visit his old gym one last time, 40 weeks ago. Back when my condom broke and Alicia became pregnant. She stared at me, not knowing what to say, and I didn't either. But there was one thing I knew for certain. Alicia. Alicia. My voice cracked on her name, and I couldn't get another word out. The papers scattered across our kitchen table looked like crime scene evidence between us. Jessica's crying erupted from the nursery down the hall, sharp and demanding. Neither of us moved. We both sat frozen in our chairs, staring at each other while our daughter's wails grew louder. The crying went on for 30 seconds, then a minute. My legs felt like concrete. Alicia's hand stayed flat on the table, not moving toward the nursery door. Jessica's cries turned more frantic, that newborn sound that usually made us both jump up instantly. Still, we all sat there, locked in some kind of standoff, until finally, Alicia pushed her chair back so hard it scraped against the floor. She walked to the nursery without looking at me. I heard her pick up Jessica. Heard the crying soften to whimpers. Heard the creak of the rocking chair. I stayed at the table, surrounded by all her evidence, my yearbook photo staring up at me. 20 minutes passed before she came back out, and when she did, she went straight to our bedroom and grabbed her pillow. She carried it to the guest room without saying anything. I understood the message and didn't follow her. That night, I lay in our bed alone, listening to Jessica wake up every 2 hours and hearing Alicia's footsteps going to the nursery each time. I didn't offer to help, and she didn't ask. The next morning, I found her in the kitchen making coffee at 6 a.m. She'd already fed Jessica and put her back down. I poured myself a cup, and we sat at the same table where all the evidence still lay spread out. She looked exhausted with dark circles under her eyes. I started talking, telling her about the vitiligo, how it started when I was 15, how bad it got by college. She listened without interrupting while I explained the rejection from that girl, the monthly treatments, and the monobenzone cream. When I finished, she set down her mug and told me Connor had visited his old gym exactly 9 months and 1 week ago. She remembered because it was the same week her car needed new tires, and she'd been stressed about money. She said they'd had drinks after her session, just catching up, and then went to his hotel. She said it only happened once. She said she felt guilty immediately, and that's why she never mentioned seeing him. We both knew the timing matched perfectly with Jessica's conception. Neither of us brought up the broken condom story we'd been telling ourselves. She stood up and said we needed to know for sure that we should order proper paternity tests. I watched her pull out her phone and delete every photo of Jessica from her Instagram, one by one. Her fingers moved fast, but I could see her jaw tighten with each deletion. The comments from her friends disappeared too, all those posts about Jessica's mixed features, her potential modeling career, the special hair products. Everything is gone in 10 minutes. She switched to her Facebook and did the same thing there. That evening, after Alicia went to bed early with Jessica, I sat at my laptop and typed an email to my dermatologist's office. My fingers shook as I wrote, asking what would happen if I stopped the treatments, how fast the pigment would return, whether it would be patchy or even. I told Alicia I'd canceled my next appointment when she asked the next morning, but I'd really just asked for information. The reply came back within hours with links to medical articles and a warning about sun sensitivity during the transition period. The doctor said the original pigmentation would return gradually over 6 to 12 months, starting with the areas that got the most blood flow. Face first, then hands, spreading outward. It would look patchy for a while, unavoidably noticeable. While I read the email, Alicia sat on the couch with her phone, scrolling through dozens of Instagram DMs from friends asking why she'd deleted all of Jessica's photos. I watched her open message after message, type a few words, then delete them and close the app. She did this for 3 hours straight, never sending a single reply. Her friend Keisha called twice, but Alicia let it go to voicemail both times. That night, we sat together at the kitchen table again and drafted a group text to both our families. We kept it short, just saying we needed some space this week and asking them not to visit. My mom had been planning to come help with the baby that weekend. Alicia's parents were supposed to bring dinner on Tuesday. We canceled everything without explaining why. The responses came immediately, worried and confused, but we didn't answer those either. 3 days passed in this weird routine of taking care of Jessica while avoiding real conversation. Then the paternity test kits we'd ordered arrived in discreet packaging. We did them right there in the kitchen, neither of us speaking while I swabbed my cheek and Alicia swabbed Jessica's. The instructions said to let each swab dry for 30 seconds before putting them in the tubes. We stood there counting silently, me holding my swab, her holding Jessica's tiny one. The baby slept through the whole thing in her bouncer. We sealed everything up, and I drove to the post office to mail them, using the express option, even though it cost extra. Late that night, when Alicia was asleep, I went to my computer and opened an encrypted folder I'd hidden deep in my documents. Inside were photos from high school, from college, from my first job, all showing my real skin. Dark brown skin with white patches scattered everywhere, like spilled paint. I stared at a photo from my 20th birthday, remembering how people stared at the beach that day, how some kids pointed, and their parents pulled them away. I opened my phone and started typing a text to my mom, trying to explain everything, but I couldn't find the right words. I wrote and deleted 5 different versions before giving up. She'd find out soon enough anyway. Everyone would. By the end of that first week, we developed a schedule for Jessica that let us both function without having to interact much. I took the 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. feedings. Alicia handled 10 p.m., 4 a.m., and 8 a.m. We kept a chart on the refrigerator, marking down feeding times, diaper changes, and naps. It felt like we were roommates taking care of someone else's baby, not parents, not spouses. The schedule meant we each got at least 1 4-hour stretch of sleep, which was enough to keep going. We stopped eating meals together, stopped watching TV together, and stopped doing anything that would require us to be in the same room when Jessica was sleeping. The next morning, while I was making coffee, Alicia walked into the kitchen and asked if I planned to tell anyone at work about all this. I fumbled with my mug and said something about needing time to think about it. But she saw right through me and wrote something in a notebook she'd been carrying around. My phone buzzed with an email from my dermatologist explaining that if I stopped treatment, my natural pigment would start coming back in patches over the next few months. And reading it made my stomach turn because I knew everyone would see the real me soon. That afternoon, we stood at the refrigerator with a marker and made a list of rules, including no more surprises, always putting Jessica's needs first, and only telling each other the truth from now on. The list looked like something lawyers would write, not married people, but at least it gave us some structure. 2 nights late, I watched Alicia sitting alone in Jessica's room, and I could tell from her face that she was thinking about all those Instagram posts about her mixed baby and how she'd loved the attention it brought her. She held Jessica and kept shaking her head, probably feeling sick about turning our daughter into some kind of trophy for social media likes. The next day, I picked up my phone and called the dermatologist's office to schedule an appointment about stopping treatment, and when Alicia asked what the call was about, I actually told her the truth, this time. She just nodded and went back to feeding Jessica without saying anything else. Later that week, Alicia spread our bank statements across the dining room table and found all the charges for my treatments over 3 years. Thousands and thousands of dollars I'd hidden by coding them as other medical expenses. She asked if this counted as insurance fraud since I'd lied about what the treatments were for, and we agreed to go through every single financial record together to find what other lies might be buried in there. That same night, I sat at my computer and typed out a long message to my mom explaining everything about the vitiligo, the treatment, and how I'd been lying to everyone for 3 years. I stared at it for 20 minutes before deleting the whole thing because I couldn't handle the idea of hearing disappointment in her voice, and somehow lying to her felt worse than lying to Alicia. My phone lit up with a text from the lab saying our paternity results would be ready in 1 to 2 business days, and I found Alicia sitting on the kitchen floor crying quietly when I went to show her. I wanted to sit down next to her and hold her like I used to, but I knew I didn't have that right anymore. So I just stood there watching her cry. The next morning, we drove to Carlo Romero's office, a family law mediator Alicia had found online who had good reviews for helping couples figure things out before the lawyers got involved. Carlo was an older guy with gray hair who spoke softly and explained custody laws and paternity issues without making us feel judged, while we both took notes on yellow legal pads. He walked us through what would happen if the test showed I wasn't Jessica's biological father, how Connor's rights would work, and what our options were for custody arrangements. About halfway through the session, Alicia's voice cracked when she admitted she'd hidden the thing with Connor because she was ashamed of it, not proud, and that she'd never meant for it to happen. Carlo nodded and said we should both think about individual therapy along with these legal discussions because there was a lot to work through beyond just the paperwork. He gave us each a folder with information about therapists who specialized in these kinds of situations and scheduled another appointment for after the test results came back. On the drive home, neither of us spoke, but I kept thinking about how Carlo had said these kinds of situations, like we weren't the first couple to sit in his office with this exact mess. That night, Alicia went to bed early while I stayed up reading through Carlo's paperwork, trying to understand all the legal terms and what they would mean for Jessica's future. The forms talked about biological fathers and legal fathers and presumed fathers, and I realized I might be losing more than just my marriage. I thought about Connor, this guy I'd never met who was about to become part of our lives, whether we wanted him to or not. The next morning, my phone showed another text from the lab saying the results were being processed and would definitely be ready within 24 hours. Alicia saw the notification on my screen when I set my phone down, and we both knew that by tomorrow, everything would change one way or another. She picked up Jessica and held her close, and I could see her memorizing our daughter's face like she was afraid something might be different once we knew the truth. We spent that day going through the motions of our schedule, feeding Jessica, changing diapers, doing laundry. But it all felt like we were actors in a play about normal life. Neither of us ate much, and we kept checking our phones even though we knew the results wouldn't come until tomorrow. That evening, I heard Alicia on the phone with someone, probably her sister from the way she was talking, and I heard her say she didn't know what she'd do if the test confirmed what we both suspected. After she hung up, she came to find me and said we needed to make a plan for telling people once we knew for sure, because keeping secrets had already destroyed enough. The next morning, an email from my dermatologist popped up with a PDF attachment about long-term depigmentation side effects. I opened it while Alicia was in the shower and started reading about increased cancer risk and sun damage. The section on psychological effects made me stop breathing for a second. Identity dysphoria, self-hatred, depression from denying your natural appearance. Every word felt like it was written about me personally. I closed the laptop when I heard the shower turn off and pretended to be checking work emails. 2 days passed with us barely talking, except about Jessica's feeding schedule. Then my phone buzzed with a notification from the lab while we were both sitting in the living room. The subject line just said, "Results available," and my hands started shaking as I clicked it open. There it was in black and white, 0% probability of paternity. Alicia saw my face and pulled out her own phone to check her email. We sat there for 10 whole minutes without saying anything, while Jessica slept in her bassinet between us. Finally, Alicia grabbed a notebook and started writing the names of people we had to tell. Her parents, my parents, her sister, and a few close friends who would find out anyway. That evening, we sat at opposite ends of the couch, trying to write what we'd say to our families. I kept starting sentences and deleting them, trying to explain the vitiligo without sounding pathetic. Alicia's paper had crossed out lines about Connor and timing, and how things happened. Neither of us could find words that didn't sound like excuses. Around 9 o'clock, Alicia picked up her phone and typed out a text to Connor asking if he could meet her at the coffee shop on 3rd Street tomorrow. Her hands were shaking so badly that she had to retype it 3 times. She kept it short, just said it was important, and about something from last year. She hit send, and immediately put the phone face down like it might explode. The next morning, I finally worked up the nerve to call my mom. She answered on the second ring, and I just started talking before I could chicken out. Told her about the vitiligo treatments, the lies about visiting Jerome, and then the big one, about Jessica not being mine. She didn't say anything for so long, I thought the call dropped. Then she asked if I was eating enough and if I was safe, and something about her voice made me start crying right there in my car. She said she'd tell Dad and that they loved me no matter what. My phone rang an hour late, and it was James from work. He started apologizing immediately for sending Alicia that old team photo, said he had no idea it would cause problems and felt terrible about the whole thing. I told him it wasn't his fault and explained briefly about my medical condition. Asked him to please keep it private and not share any more old photos with anyone. He agreed right away and said he'd delete them from his computer. That afternoon, Carlo called to schedule another meeting about our legal options. When we got to his office, he spread out papers explaining paternity disestablishment versus co-parenting agreements. He went through state laws about how I had 30 days to contest paternity since I was on the birth certificate. Said we could either remove me legally or create an agreement where I stayed involved regardless of biology. He gave us packets of information to read and said we should think carefully before making any permanent decisions. The next day, Alicia left to meet Connor at the coffee shop while I watched Jessica. She was gone for 2 hours and came back with red eyes. Said she showed him the test results and explained everything about the timeline. He was shocked but didn't yell or anything, just asked for copies of the results and said he needed time to think. She said he kept staring at the paper like it might change if he looked long enough. A week later, I drove to my dermatologist's office to talk about stopping treatment. The doctor pulled up my file, and we looked at photos from 3 years ago versus now. He explained I could stop cold turkey, but the pigment would return in patches and look uneven for months. Or we could do a gradual reduction over 6 months that would be less shocking. We made a plan to slowly decrease the monobenzone applications and let my natural color come back gradually. He prescribed special sunscreen since my skin would be extra sensitive during the transition. That night, Alicia and I had another awkward conversation about our living situation. We both knew sharing a bed was making everything worse. Neither of us was sleeping well, and the tension was affecting how we took care of Jessica. I offered to move my stuff to the guest room, and Alicia nodded without looking at me. It took 3 trips to move my clothes and toiletries down the hall. Setting up my new space felt like signing divorce papers without actually filing them. The guest room bed was small, and the closet barely fit my work clothes, but at least we'd both get some actual sleep. The next morning, I opened my laptop and started searching for therapists who dealt with identity stuff. Found 3 in our area, but only 1 had an opening this week. Victoria Torres had a website that talked about helping people with cultural identity problems and self-acceptance. I filled out her online form and got an appointment confirmation for Thursday at 2. Meanwhile, Alicia was in Jessica's room pulling all those special hair products off the shelf. I watched from the doorway as she dropped them one by one into a trash bag. The curl cream costs $40. The special shampoo she ordered online. The detangling spray she was so excited about. She held Jessica against her chest, and I heard her say something about being sorry, but I couldn't make out all the words. 2 days late, we drove back to Carlo's office and sat in those same chairs across from his desk. He pulled out a calendar and pointed to dates 30 days from now. Said we needed to make decisions about the birth certificate and custody by then, or the state would make them for us. He gave us more papers about paternity disestablishment versus co-parenting agreements. Thursday, I came and drove to Victoria's office in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax place. Her waiting room had plants everywhere and soft music playing. When she called me back, I sat on her couch, and she asked why I was there. The words came out before I could stop them. I told her I made myself disappear because I hated being black. She didn't write anything down or look shocked, just asked me to sit with that feeling for a minute without trying to fix it or explain it away. The silence felt heavy, but not bad. That evening, Alicia called her sister Lana while I fed Jessica in the kitchen. I could hear Lana's voice through the phone getting louder and louder. Alicia kept saying she knew she messed up and didn't need a lecture. But then Lana's tone changed, and she started talking about watching Jessica on weekends if we needed help. Alicia's shoulders relaxed a little. The next morning at work, I typed an email to HR about my medical condition being private. Asked them to remind staff not to share personal photos or information about employees. Then I emailed James directly and thanked him for understanding, but asked him to please not share any more old pictures with anyone. He replied within 5 minutes, saying he'd already deleted them from his computer and was sorry for any trouble. That afternoon, I drove to the dermatologist's office for my follow-up appointment. The doctor pulled up a timeline on his computer showing how we could reduce the monobenzone over 6 months. Each month would mean less cream and more of my natural color coming back. He wrote prescriptions for special sunscreen with SPF 100 and gave me a catalog for sun protective clothing. I ordered 3 long-sleeve shirts and 2 pairs of pants right there in the office. The total came to $300, but I knew I'd need them when my skin started changing. Connor called Alicia that night, saying he'd scheduled his own test at a different lab to confirm everything. She put him on speaker while I washed dishes. He wanted all the legal stuff documented properly and asked if she'd meet with Carlo separately to understand his rights. She agreed, and they set up appointments for next week. 5 days later, I had my second session with Victoria. This time, she asked about when I decided to start the treatments. I told her about meeting Alicia and how she grabbed my hand at that barbecue. How she said my skin was like butter and perfect. Victoria pointed out how that compliment hooked me into maintaining the lie for 3 years. She helped me see the pattern of wanting approval so badly I'd erase myself to get it. We talked about other times I'd changed myself for validation. That weekend, Alicia and I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook between us. We wrote down who would do night feedings on which days, who would handle laundry and dishes and grocery shopping. It felt like making a roommate chore chart, but at least we stopped fighting about who did what. The schedule went on the refrigerator next to Jessica's doctor appointment reminders. Every task had a name and a day next to it. No more keeping score in our heads or getting mad about stuff not getting done. We even put down specific times for who would watch Jessica while the other person showered or went to the store. Having it all written out made the house run smoothly, even though we barely talked to each other beyond logistics. That night, I found Alicia sitting on our bedroom floor with her journal open on her lap, writing fast with her head bent low. She didn't hear me walk by until I accidentally kicked one of Jessica's toys, and it squeaked. She slammed the journal shut and shoved it under the bed, but I'd already seen some of the words on the page. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I pulled the journal out and read what she'd written about turning Jessica into her personal trophy for Instagram likes. Page after page described how she'd planned the photo shoots and picked outfits based on what would get the most comments. She wrote about feeling important when other moms asked about Jessica's hair products and how the attention made her feel special for the first time since high school. I put the journal back exactly where I found it and never mentioned seeing it. 2 days later, I had my third session with Victoria, where we spent the whole hour practicing what I'd say to my parents. She made me repeat the words over and over until I could say them without making excuses or asking for forgiveness. We practiced in front of a mirror so I could see when my body language turned defensive. She had me write down the main points on index cards, then threw them away so I'd have to speak from my heart instead of a script. By the end of the session, my voice was hoarse from repeating the same sentences 20 times. That evening, Carlo called while we were eating dinner and asked about our decisions for the legal paperwork. I told him Connor's test results weren't back yet, and we needed one more week to figure everything out. He reminded us that the state only gave us 60 days to file for paternity disestablishment before it got more complicated. He sent an email with all the deadlines highlighted in yellow and a checklist of documents we'd need. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house with my phone full of photos showing the dark patches coming back behind my ears and on my scalp. My mom opened the door and pulled me into a hug before I could say anything. We sat at their kitchen table, where I'd eaten thousands of meals growing up, and I showed them the pictures one by one. My mom held my hand while my dad sat completely still, staring at the photos on my phone screen. I explained about the monobenzone and the monthly appointments, and the 3 years of lying about cousin Jerome. My dad's jaw kept clenching and unclenching as I talked. When I finished, he stood up and walked to the window with his back to us. My mom squeezed my hand harder and asked when I'd started hating myself so much. My dad finally turned around and said he was hurt, but we needed to be practical about what came next. He asked about legal stuff and money and whether I had a plan for when everyone found out. My mom interrupted him to ask if I was going to stop punishing myself for being black. The way she said it broke something inside me, and I started crying at their kitchen table like I was 5 years old again. They let me cry without trying to make me feel better, which was exactly what Victoria said I needed. 3 days later, Connor's lab called Alicia to confirm his test results showed he was Jessica's biological father with 99.9% certainty. She forwarded the email to me and Carlo without any message attached. Connor agreed to meet with Carlo that week to start working on custody arrangements. The confirmation brought relief, even though it meant everything would change. We spent that night making a list of which friends to tell first before rumors started spreading. The next morning, we sent a group text to our 6 closest friends with basic facts about the paternity situation and asked them not to share details yet. Most replied with shock and offers to help with whatever we needed. 2 didn't respond at all, and we knew those friendships were probably over. One friend called crying because she'd suspected something was wrong, but didn't know how to ask. We could feel our whole social circle shifting as the news spread, despite asking people to keep it quiet. 5 days later, Carlo set up a meeting in his office conference room with Connor, Alicia, and me to discuss custody. Connor showed up in a suit, looking nervous, and kept checking his phone. He said he wanted to be involved but needed time to prepare, since he'd only known about Jessica for 2 weeks. We spent 3 hours creating a temporary visitation guideline, initially starting with 2-hour supervised visits every Saturday. Carlo wrote everything down and had us all sign a preliminary agreement that could expand as Connor got more comfortable. The whole time I sat there, I knew I had no legal right to be in that room anymore. That night, I told Carlo I wanted to legally disestablish paternity, even though it meant giving up all rights to Jessica. He explained that staying on the birth certificate when I wasn't the biological father would just create more problems later. Signing those papers felt like cutting off a piece of myself, but keeping the lie going would be worse. The next morning, Carlo walked us through all the paperwork requirements for changing Jessica's birth certificate to list Connor as the father. We'd need the DNA results, court petitions, Connor's consent forms, and a judge's order, which would take at least 6 weeks to process. He showed us a timeline on his computer with every deadline and requirement color-coded by who needed to do what. Having concrete steps made the huge mess feel like something we could actually handle, LE, even though every checkbox meant accepting that the life we'd planned was over. At my dermatology appointment 2 weeks later, the nurse took photos of the patches behind my ears that had gotten darker since I'd reduced the monobenzone. The doctor measured each spot with a ruler and marked the sizes on my chart while I sat on the exam table. He showed me how the pigment was returning faster than expected, especially on my scalp, where new dark spots were appearing daily. I asked him about sun protection, and he gave me samples of SPF 100 sunscreen specifically made for people with vitiligo. That afternoon, I met with Victoria at her office, and we practiced different ways to explain my changing appearance at work. She had me stand in front of a mirror and say simple statements without adding extra details or apologies. I kept wanting to over-explain, but she stopped me each time and made me start over with just the basic facts. We role-played different scenarios where coworkers might ask questions, and she taught me to redirect conversations back to work topics. The next day, Carlo called us all to his office to work out Jessica's expense spreadsheet on his computer. Connor sat across from me, looking uncomfortable, Lee while Carlo typed numbers into different columns for formula, diapers, clothes, and medical costs. We agreed to split everything 3 ways for now, with Connor paying a third once his next paycheck came through. Carlo printed 3 copies and had us initial each page to avoid confusion about who owed what each month. Connor asked about adding Jessica to his insurance, and Carlo explained the process would take about 6 weeks through his employer. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote Alicia a letter on plain notebook paper. I promised not to bring up her affair in any future arguments or use it against her in any way. I wrote that I was done hiding my real skin color and would let the patches come back naturally. I left the letter on the counter and watched from the hallway as she read it without saying anything. Her shoulders dropped, a little, tired, and she folded it carefully before putting it in her purse. 2 days late, I found her response letter on my pillow, written in her neat handwriting on yellow legal paper. She wrote that she would stop calling Jessica mixed and would tell people she'd been wrong about the baby's background. She promised to keep Jessica off social media completely and had already made her Instagram private with no baby photos. At the bottom, she wrote that she'd already told her sister Lana the truth about everything. I spent the next morning searching apartment listings online and found a 1-bedroom in our same complex that would be ready in 3 weeks. The landlord said I could do a walkthrough that afternoon. I went alone and checked the water pressure and closet space. It was smaller than our current place, but it had a decent kitchen and was only 2 buildings away from Alicia. I signed the lease application and put down the deposit using money from my savings account. When I got home, I showed Alicia the floor plan, and we agreed it made sense for Jessica's schedule. That weekend, I set up my laptop for a video call with my parents, who were at their kitchen table. My mom asked right away about the dark spots visible on my neck, and I told her I'd stop the treatments. My dad leaned forward and asked if I was really done pretending to be white this time. I promised them I'd show up as myself when they visited next month with no makeup or cover-up. My mom's face relaxed, and she started talking about what she'd cook when she came to visit. The following Monday, Carlo had us all back in his office to sign the final custody paperwork. Connor would have Jessica every other weekend starting next month, with pickups at noon on Saturdays. I would help with transportation and emergency childcare, but I had no official custody rights anymore. Carlo went through each page explaining the legal terms while we signed and dated everything in blue ink. He made copies for everyone and put the originals in a folder for filing with the court. This morning, I woke up early and applied thick sunscreen to all my darker patches before getting dressed. My phone buzzed with a text from my mom checking if I'd eaten breakfast and reminding me to drink water. The calendar notification for my therapy appointment with Victoria popped up for 3 o'clock. I looked in the bathroom mirror at my changing face with patches of brown spreading across my forehead and cheeks. Life felt messy, with the apartment move coming up and learning to co-parent with Connor involved. But at least I wasn't lying anymore about who I was or where I came from. Well, thanks for hanging out and wandering through all this with me. Definitely made things a lot more fun. I'll catch you in the next one. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.